Chapter 1. The Tower of Isolation. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far from the reach of most travelers, there stood a high, unapproachable tower. It rose from the forest like a sentinel, its stone walls covered in ivy, shrouded in mystery. At the top of this tower there lived a young woman named Rapunzel. She had golden hair that fell in cascades to the floor below, and a heart full of dreams she could never speak aloud. Rapunzel had been locked away for as long as she could remember, kept in the tower by a cruel enchantress named Mother Gothel. The reason for her confinement was known only to Gothel, a woman whose past was tangled in secrets. To the world, Gothel was a sorceress who had once been kind, but had grown bitter and selfish over time. Her obsession with youth and beauty had driven her to use dark magic to preserve her life. The tower itself was not just a physical prison, but a mental one as well. Rapunzel spent her days gazing out the small window at the distant horizon, imagining the world she could never touch. The sky was always a beautiful blue, but it was far out of reach. She dreamed of freedom, of life beyond the stone walls, but each day she was reminded that it was not meant for her. Her only companion was Gothel, who visited her daily, bringing food and speaking with her as though Rapunzel were a child. "Stay here, my dear," Gothel would say, with a smile that never reached her eyes. "The world outside is full of dangers. I keep you here to protect you." But Rapunzel wasn't so sure. She had grown curious. Every day she noticed more and more how the world outside was filled with sounds, colors, and scents that she could never experience. She wondered what it would be like to feel the warmth of the sun on her skin, to hear the laughter of people, to feel the soft grass beneath her feet. On one particularly still day, Rapunzel made a decision. She wouldn't stay in the tower forever. She wouldn't wait for some knight or stranger to come rescue her. She would find a way to escape. The tower may have been her prison, but her spirit would not be confined. Chapter 2. The Secret Discovery. The days passed slowly in the tower, but Rapunzel's resolve only grew stronger. She had started to observe the small things around her more closely. The creaks of the tower walls, the way the sunlight changed through the window as the days moved on, and the hidden corners of her prison she had never paid attention to before. She began to notice a faint draft coming from a small crack in the stone behind her bed. It was so subtle that Gothel had never noticed it, but Rapunzel's curiosity pushed her to investigate. One evening, when Gothel was away, Rapunzel carefully moved her bed aside and began pulling at the crack. It was harder than she expected, and the stones were rough against her fingers. But after a few minutes of effort, the stone gave way, revealing a narrow passage hidden within the wall. Rapunzel's heart raced with excitement. Could this be her way out? She crawled through the passage, which led to a dark, forgotten room. The room was small and filled with dust, but it seemed untouched by time. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with old books, maps, and strange objects. A strange sense of wonder washed over Rapunzel. This was a place no one had been for years, a place full of forgotten knowledge. As she wandered through the room, her eyes fell on a particular book. It was a thick, leather-bound volume, its cover worn with age. The title was barely legible, but she could make out the words, "Magic of the Old World." Intrigued, she picked it up and opened it. Inside were pages filled with strange symbols, illustrations of creatures she had never seen, and spells that seemed to speak of powers far beyond anything she had ever heard of. Rapunzel sat on the floor, reading through the book with intense focus. As the hours passed, she learned about the ancient magic that had once been used to shape the world, including the magic that kept her trapped in the tower. The book revealed that the tower itself was a creation of enchantment, bound to the will of the sorceress Gothel, and that Rapunzel's hair was not just beautiful, it was a conduit for immense magical power. For the first time, Rapunzel realized that she might not be helpless after all. She had a power inside her, one that, if harnessed, could give her the strength to escape the tower and face whatever lay beyond. But with this discovery came a new question. How could she learn to control this power? She had no one to teach her, and she knew that Gothel would never allow her to explore the magic. But Rapunzel was no longer the scared, isolated girl she once was. She was determined to unlock the secrets of her power, and if that meant defying Gothel, she would do it. The first step was to learn everything she could from this hidden room, the forgotten magic, and the ancient book she had found. And so, night after night, Rapunzel spent hours reading, practicing the small incantations she could understand, and discovering more about herself. She began to feel the power coursing through her veins, though it was still wild and untamed. She knew that the time would come when she could leave the tower. But first, she needed to master the magic within her. She had no idea how much it would take, but there was no turning back now. Chapter 3. The First Escape. Rapunzel's heart beat faster as she closed the book and tucked it back into its hidden nook. She had learned so much in just a few nights, but there was still so much more to uncover. The more she studied, the more she realized how powerful the magic inside her truly was. Her hair, which Gothel had always admired, was not just a symbol of her beauty. It was the key to the ancient magic that bound her to the tower. But the power wasn't just in her hair, it was within her, waiting to be awakened. But as Rapunzel sat in the darkened room, a voice echoed in her mind. Gothel. She had to be careful. The sorceress was smart. She could sense when something was amiss. Rapunzel's secret would not stay hidden for long if she wasn't careful. The days passed in a blur of stolen moments, careful study, quiet incantations, and growing restlessness. Rapunzel had never been this determined in her life. The need to escape, to break free from the prison of her tower, had become a fire inside her, burning brighter with each passing day. One evening, as Gothel left for one of her mysterious trips into the nearby village, Rapunzel knew this was the moment. She had spent weeks preparing, reading every spell and incantation that she could find in the hidden room. She felt ready, perhaps more ready than she had ever been in her life. Rapunzel stood in front of the large, circular window that looked out over the forest, the world beyond so close, yet so distant. She could see the sun beginning to set, casting a golden glow across the land, and she knew that this might be her only chance. Taking a deep breath, Rapunzel walked to the center of the room and closed her eyes. She focused on the power that surged within her, the strength that had been growing each day. She whispered an incantation she had learned from the book, the words unfamiliar but filled with raw, ancient energy. Slowly, she felt the magic begin to hum beneath her skin, gathering in her hands. The long strands of her hair began to glow with a soft, golden light, and for the first time, Rapunzel felt the full extent of the magic that was tied to her. She reached for the stone walls, her hands brushing against the cool surface. With a simple command, her hair wove itself around the tower's walls, pulling at the stone. The magic responded to her will, and with a sudden burst of energy, the wall cracked open, revealing a hidden passage that led downward. Rapunzel's pulse quickened. She had done it. She had found a way out. But there was no time to waste. As she looked down at the passage, she felt a rush of fear mixed with excitement. The world outside was not the safe, familiar place she had imagined. It was filled with dangers she couldn't even begin to comprehend. But it was her only chance, her only hope. Rapunzel gathered her courage and stepped into the passage, letting her hair fall back to its natural length. She had learned enough to know that if she wanted to control the magic, she had to trust in herself. The passage led to a narrow staircase that spiraled down into the heart of the tower. Rapunzel's steps echoed in the quiet, her heart pounding in her chest. She was almost there. Finally, she reached the base of the tower and stepped outside. The cool night air hit her skin, and for the first time in years, Rapunzel felt the wind on her face. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. She was free, but the world outside was vast and unknown. The forest stretched out before her, a dark and foreboding place. She knew she had to keep moving, but where would she go? What would she do? She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer a prisoner. As she disappeared into the shadows of the forest, Rapunzel knew that her journey had only just begun. Chapter 4. The Forest of Secrets. The dense forest enveloped Rapunzel like a dark cloak. The trees were ancient, their gnarled branches reaching out like twisted fingers, and the ground beneath her feet was soft with layers of fallen leaves. For a moment she stood still, listening to the sounds of the night, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the creak of branches swaying in the wind. The world was so different from the sterile silence of the tower. With every step, Rapunzel felt a sense of freedom she had never known. She had imagined this moment countless times, but now that she was actually here, the fear of the unknown crept into her heart. The forest was alive with secrets, mysteries that were ancient and untold. But for Rapunzel, there was no turning back. She was free now, and she had to keep moving forward. Her mind raced with questions. Where would she go? What would she do next? The world beyond the tower was so vast and full of dangers. Gothel's warnings echoed in her mind. The world outside is full of dangers. I keep you here to protect you. Rapunzel shook her head. She couldn't let fear control her. Gothel had kept her locked away for years, but Rapunzel was no longer the same girl. She had learned to harness the magic inside her, and she was stronger now, more capable of facing whatever challenges lay ahead. The key was to trust in herself and in the magic she had discovered. As she ventured deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around her, the darkness growing thicker with every step. Rapunzel paused, her senses on high alert. There was something in the air, a presence that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She wasn't alone. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the silence, followed by the soft snap of twigs. Rapunzel turned quickly, her heart racing. Out of the shadows emerged a figure, a tall, cloaked man with piercing blue eyes that glimmered like the stars above. "Who are you?" Rapunzel asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. The man took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her. I could ask you the same thing, young lady. What is a princess like you doing out here in the middle of the night?" Rapunzel stiffened at the mention of princess. She had never thought of herself that way. In her mind, she was just Rapunzel, a girl with long golden hair and a secret she couldn't share with anyone. But the man before her seemed to know something more. "I'm not a princess," she said quickly, her voice firm. "I'm just a woman seeking freedom." The man studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "Freedom, you say?" He stepped forward again, his eyes narrowing. "That's something not many can achieve. The world is full of dangers for those who walk alone." Rapunzel didn't know why, but something in his words rang true. She had been alone her entire life, isolated from the world by Gothel's magic. And now that she was free, she realized that the world wasn't as simple as she had imagined. "Who are you?" she asked again, this time with more curiosity than fear. The man's lips curved into a smile, though it was more of a smirk. "A wanderer," he said, his voice low and mysterious. "I've traveled through these forests for years, seeking out the things most people are afraid to find." Rapunzel took a cautious step back. What kind of things? The man's eyes sparkled with something dangerous. Magic, ancient powers, creatures that only exist in legends. "But you," he said, his gaze lingering on her long hair, "you seem to have a power of your own." Rapunzel's heart skipped a beat. She had learned about the magic in her hair, but she had kept it hidden, unsure of how to fully control it. But this man, this stranger, seemed to know more than he let on. "I don't know what you mean," Rapunzel said, her voice shaky now. "I'm just trying to find my way." The man stepped closer, his gaze intense. "The forest is no place for someone like you to wander alone. There are forces here that would see you lost. But," he said, his tone softening slightly, "I can help you. If you truly seek freedom, I can show you how to survive in this world." Rapunzel hesitated. She didn't trust him completely, but something in his words seemed to resonate with her. Perhaps he knew something she didn't. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked cautiously. The man smiled, a knowing smile. "Because, like you, I seek something more. I don't offer help without expecting something in return." His eyes gleamed. "But I think you and I can help each other." Rapunzel stood in silence for a moment, considering his offer. She had never trusted anyone before, but she couldn't do this alone. She needed answers, and perhaps this stranger could provide them. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "What do you want in return?" The man's smile widened. "Just your trust, for now. We'll see what comes next." With that, he turned and began walking into the forest. Rapunzel followed him, unsure of what awaited her in the shadows. But one thing was certain. Her journey had only just begun, and this man might be the key to understanding the magic she held within her. Chapter 5. The wanderer's secret. Rapunzel followed the man through the dense forest, her steps quiet and careful, but her mind raced with questions. She didn't fully trust him yet, but there was something about the way he moved through the woods, as though he belonged here, that made her feel strangely safe. His presence was calm, confident, almost as though he had been waiting for her to arrive. They walked for what felt like hours, the darkened forest surrounding them in eerie silence. The moonlight barely filtered through the canopy above, casting fleeting shadows across their path. Rapunzel's heart once beating wildly with fear, began to slow. The man's steady pace and the soft rustling of the trees soothed her, though she still couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. After a while, they came to a clearing. In the center was a large, ancient oak tree, its twisted branches reaching up to the sky like a guardian of the forest. Beneath it, a small fire burned, its warm glow flickering in the cool night air. A small camp had been set up, blankets, a few simple belongings, and a small kettle that was just beginning to boil. "This is where I rest," the man said, as he gestured to the camp. "You should eat and rest too. You've come a long way." Rapunzel nodded, her stomach growling in protest. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until now. Her hands were still trembling from the adrenaline of her escape, but the smell of food made her realize just how much she had missed simple comforts. She sat by the fire as the man poured her a cup of warm tea. He sat opposite her, his expression unreadable as he studied her. The firelight flickered across his face, casting shadows that made his features seem even more mysterious. "I know you have questions," he said after a long pause, breaking the silence that had hung between them. Rapunzel hesitated. She had so many questions, but she didn't know where to start. Instead, she chose the one that had been burning at the back of her mind since their first meeting. "Who are you, really?" she asked, her voice soft but determined. "What do you want with me?" The man leaned forward, his blue eyes gleaming in the firelight. "My name is Dorian," he said. "I am a wanderer, as I told you before, but not just any wanderer. I've spent my life searching for something, the truth behind the magic of this land." Rapunzel furrowed her brow. "The magic of this land? What do you mean?" Dorian's gaze darkened for a moment, and he leaned back against a tree, his eyes distant. "There are ancient forces in this world, forces that have been forgotten by most. Some of them are dark, some are light, but all of them are powerful. The magic that kept you in that tower, your hair, your power, it's a part of something much older than you realize. It's not just about freedom, it's about balance, and balance is something this world is losing." Rapunzel's mind spun with his words. She had always known that her power was different, but she had never imagined it could be part of something so much bigger. "Are you saying that my hair, my magic, has something to do with this imbalance?" Dorian nodded slowly. "Yes, you are one of the few who can tap into the ancient magic. That's why Gothel kept you hidden. She was afraid of you. And now that you've escaped, you have the potential to either restore balance or tip it completely out of control." Rapunzel's breath caught in her throat. She had never considered the consequences of her freedom in this way. She had only wanted to be free. She had never asked herself what that freedom meant for the world around her. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I just wanted to live my life." Dorian studied her closely. "None of us ask for the powers we have, but we can choose what we do with them. The question is, what kind of person do you want to be, Rapunzel?" His words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so many years in isolation, trapped in the tower, that she had never really thought about who she was or what kind of person she wanted to become. She had only thought about escaping. Now, it seemed, the world was asking her to decide. "I don't know," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "I never had the chance to choose." Dorian smiled faintly. "Then you'll have to learn, and I can help you, But first, you must understand what you're up against. There are others who want the power you possess. Others who will stop at nothing to take it from you. Rapunzel looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. Who? What do you mean? Dorian's expression darkened. There are factions, groups that seek to control the ancient magic for their own purposes. Some of them are led by people who were once close to you. People who know your power and want to use it. And Gothel is just the beginning. Rapunzel's heart sank. She hadn't considered that Gothel wasn't the only one who wanted her power, but the idea that someone close to her could be involved, that was too much to bear. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. Dorian's gaze softened. You don't have to do it alone. I'll be here to guide you, but you must trust me, Rapunzel. The road ahead will not be easy. You will face dangers that will test everything you believe in, but you can control your destiny. Rapunzel nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in her heart. She didn't know if she was ready for the challenges ahead, but one thing was clear. She couldn't go back to the tower, and whatever lay ahead, she would face it with courage. All right, she said quietly. I'll trust you. Dorian's smile returned, this time warmer. Good. Now rest. Tomorrow we begin. Chapter 6. The Path of Shadows. The morning came with a quiet stillness. The forest bathed in the pale light of dawn. Rapunzel awoke to find the fire from the night before, now just smoldering embers. Dorian had already risen, his form outlined by the faint glow of the first light of day. He was moving swiftly, preparing for the journey ahead. Rapunzel stretched and stood up, feeling the weight of exhaustion in her limbs. The night had been restless, filled with unsettling dreams, dreams of dark figures chasing her, of being trapped in the very tower she had escaped. But when she opened her eyes, she found herself once again in the strange safety of the forest. The world felt different now somehow, dangerous, yet full of possibility. Good morning, Dorian greeted her without turning, his voice as steady as always. He seemed unaffected by the early hour, his energy unyielding. Rapunzel nodded, though she felt far from ready to start the day. The night had brought her no answers, only more questions. Dorian turned to face her, his eyes sharp, as he surveyed her expression. You seemed troubled, he said, his voice gentle. I can see it in your eyes. The power within you is a heavy burden, Rapunzel, but it's yours to carry. You must learn to control it, or it will control you. Rapunzel didn't know how to respond. She had no idea how to control the magic that surged through her. The truth was, she didn't even fully understand it. All she knew was that it had always been a part of her, something she couldn't escape. And now it was the key to everything. Dorian seemed to read her thoughts, as if he could sense the storm brewing inside her. He stepped closer, his tone softening. I know you're scared. I was too. When I first started on this path, I didn't understand the magic or the forces at play, but I've learned that fear is a part of the journey. You cannot outrun it. You must face it head on. Rapunzel looked at him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him, to trust that she could find a way to control her powers. But the world was so much bigger than she had ever imagined, and she had no idea what she was truly up against. We'll start today, Dorian said, snapping her from her thoughts. There's someone I want you to meet, someone who can help you understand the magic inside you." "Who?" Rapunzel asked, her curiosity piqued. "An old friend," Dorian replied cryptically. "You'll see." Without another word, he led the way, guiding Rapunzel deeper into the forest. The trees grew taller, their branches twisting and intertwining, creating a canopy so thick that only slivers of sunlight could make it through. The air grew cooler, filled with the scent of pine and earth. As they walked, Dorian spoke little, his eyes scanning the surroundings with practiced caution. Rapunzel, on the other hand, couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Her senses were heightened, and every rustling leaf, every snap of a twig, made her jump. She didn't know what to expect in this strange, shadowy world, but she couldn't deny the sense of dread that was beginning to take root in her chest. They continued for hours, winding through the thick forest until they reached a small clearing. At the center stood a figure, a woman with long, flowing silver hair, her back turned to them as she tended to a small garden of herbs and flowers. The woman's movements were graceful, almost ethereal, as though she were part of the forest itself. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Rapunzel whispered to Dorian, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Dorian's lips twitched in a smile. "Trust me." The woman turned, and for a brief moment Rapunzel was struck by the woman's piercing green eyes. They were wise eyes, filled with centuries of knowledge. Her presence was calm, yet powerful, and Rapunzel immediately sensed that this was someone not to be taken lightly. "Ah, Dorian," the woman said with a smile, "I see you've brought the girl." Rapunzel blinked in surprise. "You knew I was coming?" The woman nodded. "I've known about you for a long time, Rapunzel. Your hair, your power, it's no secret. The world has been waiting for you to awaken." Rapunzel felt a chill run down her spine. "Waiting for me? Why? I don't even understand what's happening to me." The woman's expression softened. "That's why I'm here. My name is Alara, and I've spent my life studying the ancient magic that flows through this world. The magic in you is both a blessing and a curse. But it doesn't have to be either. It can be a tool, a weapon, or a shield. But only if you learn to control it." Rapunzel's heart raced. "How do I control it?" Alara walked toward her, her steps light but purposeful. "You must first understand the source of the magic, the forest, the earth, the wind. All of it is connected, and so are you. Your hair is a conduit for that power, but it is not the source. The magic is inside you, Rapunzel. It always has been. You just need to unlock it." Rapunzel swallowed hard. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are," Alara said, her voice unwavering. "But strength comes from understanding, not from fear. You've been hiding from your power for too long. Now you must face it." The words hit Rapunzel harder than she expected. She had spent her entire life hiding from Gothel, hiding from her magic, hiding from the world. But now it seemed there was no more hiding. The world had found her, and she had to face whatever came next. Alara's gaze softened. "I can teach you the ways of the ancient magic, Rapunzel. But first, you must let go of your fear. You must trust in yourself and the power you hold." Rapunzel closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of ancient wisdom. She felt it, the magic calling to her, urging her to embrace it. She didn't know if she was ready, but she knew one thing. The journey ahead would change her forever. "I'm ready," Rapunzel whispered, her voice steady with newfound resolve. Ilara smiled. Then let's begin. Chapter 7. The Awakening. The days blurred together as Rapunzel began her training under Ilara's watchful eye. The ancient woman had a calm, patient presence, guiding Rapunzel through the forest, teaching her to connect with the earth, the wind, and the magic that pulsed beneath the surface of everything. Though Rapunzel struggled at times, she could feel the power within her growing, just as Ilara had promised. Each morning, they ventured deeper into the forest, stopping to gather herbs or listen to the whisper of the wind through the trees. Ilara taught her how to read the signs of the world around her, how to sense the magic that flowed in currents beneath the ground. It was in the roots of the trees, the leaves fluttering in the breeze, the way the earth shifted beneath her feet. But it wasn't just the natural world that Rapunzel was learning to connect with. It was her own magic, her own hair. Ilara had explained that her hair wasn't merely a symbol of her power, it was a vessel. It was the key to unlocking the magic that lay dormant within her. But to do so, Rapunzel had to stop seeing it as something to fear or hide from. Ilara's lessons were grueling. Some days, Rapunzel felt as if she would never master even the simplest techniques. But with each failure, Ilara was there, guiding her, reminding her that magic was not about perfection. It was about balance, trust, and belief in oneself. "You have to stop fighting your power, Rapunzel," Ilara had told her one evening as they sat beside the flickering campfire. "It's not your enemy. It's a part of you, just like the blood that runs in your veins. If you fight it, you'll only make it stronger. But if you accept it, embrace it, it will become a tool you can use to protect yourself and the ones you love." Rapunzel had nodded, but even now there were days when she felt as if she were standing on the edge of a great abyss, unsure of whether to take the leap. Her magic, though powerful, felt so uncontrollable. The fire within her flickered and swirled, unpredictable. Some days she could make her hair glow with light, while other times it tangled in knots, refusing to obey her commands. And then there were the dreams. Each night they grew more vivid, more terrifying. She would see Gothel, her face twisted in anger, chasing her through dark corridors. She would feel the weight of her magic pressing down on her as if it were trying to consume her from the inside out. And always the shadowy figure of a man would stand in the distance, watching, waiting. Dorian, perhaps? Or someone else? Rapunzel shook off the unease, focusing on the present. There was work to be done. It was early one morning when Ilara led her to a quiet clearing, the ground soft with moss, and the air thick with the scent of damp earth. Rapunzel's heart pounded in her chest. Today felt different. Today felt important. "Today you will face your magic directly," Ilara said, her voice low but steady. "You will tap into the earth beneath your feet and draw out your power." Rapunzel nodded, feeling both nervous and determined. She had done her exercises, she had practiced, but this was the moment. This was when she would truly begin to understand what she was capable of. Ilara stepped aside, giving Rapunzel space. "Take off your shoes," she instructed. Rapunzel hesitated, then complied, feeling the coolness of the earth beneath her feet. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, centering herself. She could feel the pulse of the forest, the hum of the earth beneath her, the way the trees seemed to lean in closer as if listening to her. "Now," Ilara said softly, "reach out with your senses. Let the earth guide you. Let the magic flow through you. Don't try to control it. Just allow it to be. Rapunzel hesitated for only a moment before she let go of her fears. She reached down, her mind clearing, her body relaxing into the earth. She could feel it, something ancient and powerful stirring beneath her skin. Her hair, long and thick, began to shimmer in the dim light of the forest. The magic inside her rose like a tide, warm and alive, ready to break free. For a moment, it was overwhelming. The energy surged through her veins, flooding her senses. She could feel every leaf in the trees, every blade of grass beneath her feet. The world around her felt alive. And yet, the power was not hers to command. Not yet. She struggled to focus, to ground herself in the present moment. Focus! Ilara's voice cut through the chaos of her mind. Focus on your connection to the earth. Feel the roots beneath you. Feel the pulse of the forest. Rapunzel clenched her fists, her breathing shallow. She could hear the blood rushing in her ears, the wind whispering through the trees. She pushed through the flood of sensation, allowing the magic to rise and settle within her. Slowly, she felt the rush begin to ease, the world becoming clearer. Her hair, now glowing brightly, curled and twisted in the air like a living thing, responding to the pulse of the earth beneath her. She could feel it, the magic weaving through her body, around her, connecting her to the world in ways she had never imagined. And then, as if a dam had broken, the magic surged through her completely. She raised her arms, and in an instant, the ground beneath her feet cracked open, vines and flowers springing from the earth in a wild, beautiful eruption. Rapunzel gasped, her eyes wide with shock and awe. She had done it. She had tapped into her power, fully and without fear. Ilara's eyes gleamed with pride as she watched. "Well done," she said quietly. "You have begun to understand your magic, but this is only the beginning. There is much more to learn, much more to control. Do not think that this is the end of the journey." Rapunzel nodded, still catching her breath. The power she had felt coursing through her was intoxicating, but also frightening. She had only just begun to touch the surface of what she could do, and she knew that the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges. But for the first time, she felt a spark of hope. The magic was hers, and with it she could face whatever came next. Chapter 8. The Unseen Threat. The days following Rapunzel's breakthrough were filled with a newfound sense of purpose. Her magic, once a source of fear and uncertainty, now seemed like an extension of herself, a tool to shape her world, if only she could learn to harness it fully. Under Ilara's watchful eye, she practiced daily, each exercise strengthening her connection to the earth, to the wind, and to the power that flowed through her. Yet, despite the progress, a lingering unease began to settle in Rapunzel's chest. The dreams hadn't stopped. They had only grown more vivid, more intense. The shadowy figure that had haunted her thoughts was always there, watching, waiting. It felt like a warning, an omen that she couldn't escape. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest, Rapunzel sat by the campfire, her mind troubled. The fire flickered, casting fleeting glows of warmth, but it did little to ease the chill that had settled over her. "Ilara," Rapunzel began, her voice low, hesitant, "do you think there's something coming? I feel like there's something I've missed, something I can't see, but I know is out there." Ilara looked up from the herbs she was grinding, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing, her eyes narrowing as if considering Rapunzel's words carefully. Then she stood up and walked over to where Rapunzel sat. "There is always something lurking in the shadows," Elara said slowly, her voice as steady as the ground beneath them. "The world is not as simple as it may seem. Magic is a force that attracts both light and darkness, and those who covet it are never far away." Rapunzel frowned, confusion mixing with the unease growing within her. "But what does that mean for me, for my magic?" "It means that you are not the only one aware of your power," Elara replied, "and some may wish to use it for their own ends." Rapunzel's heart skipped a beat. "Who would want to use my magic? I don't even understand it fully myself." "That's exactly why they might want it," Elara said. "There are those who seek control over such power, those who believe that it can be bent to their will. And the moment you began to awaken, you became a target." Rapunzel's mind raced, the weight of Elara's words settling over her like a cold blanket. "But I have no idea who they are, or where they are. How can I fight something I can't even see?" "You don't have to see it to fight it," Elara said, kneeling beside Rapunzel. "But you must be vigilant. Your magic will act as a beacon, and the more you learn to control it, the more attention you will draw. There are those who know exactly what you are capable of, those who are waiting for you to slip up." Rapunzel swallowed hard, the weight of the world suddenly pressing down on her shoulders. She had thought that escaping the tower would be her greatest challenge. But now, the true test of her strength had only just begun. The wind picked up, rustling the trees around them, and for a moment Rapunzel thought she heard something, a rustling from the shadows, like footsteps in the distance. Elara's gaze shifted to the trees, her eyes narrowing. "Stay close," she instructed sharply. "Something is out there." Rapunzel stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She had learned to listen to her instincts, and now they screamed at her that danger was near. She reached for her hair, feeling the familiar warmth of her magic rising within her, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to face whatever was approaching. The rustling grew louder, closer now. Rapunzel could hear the twigs snap underfoot, the sound unmistakable. She turned to Elara, who was now standing with a steady resolve, her hand resting on the hilt of a knife she had tucked into her belt. "Whatever happens," Elara said quietly, her eyes locking onto Rapunzel's, "don't let go of your magic. It's your only defense. Trust it, even when you feel afraid." Before Rapunzel could respond, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man tall and cloaked in shadow. His features were obscured, but his presence was unmistakable. The air around him felt charged, tense, as though he carried an aura of danger with every step. Rapunzel's heart skipped. This was the figure from her dreams, the one who had been watching her from the shadows. Elara stepped forward, placing herself between the stranger and Rapunzel. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp and commanding. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, his movements deliberate and slow. His voice, when it came, was low, smooth, and full of an unsettling calm. "I could ask you the same question, old woman," he said, his tone almost mocking. "But I know who you are. The question is, who is she?" Rapunzel felt a shiver run down her spine. This was no ordinary man. There was something unnatural about him, something ancient and dark. She could feel it in the air around them, thick with the weight of power. Elara's grip on her knife tightened. "Leave now," she warned, her eyes never leaving his. "You don't belong here." The man chuckled softly, a dark, hollow sound that made Rapunzel's skin crawl. "I belong wherever I choose to be," he said, "and as for her—" His gaze flicked to Rapunzel, and she felt an unsettling pull in her chest. "I've been waiting for her for a long time." Rapunzel's heart raced. "Who are you?" she demanded again, her voice trembling despite herself. The man tilted his head, studying her with a dark, almost predatory interest. "You don't remember me?" he asked. "No matter. I will make you remember." With a sudden, unnatural speed, the man lunged forward, his hand outstretched as if to grab her. Rapunzel's instincts kicked in, and without thinking, she reached out with her magic, her hair glowing with bright, radiant light. The moment her magic surged, the man stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening with surprise. "Impressive," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of admiration and malice. "But you're still not ready." And with that, he melted into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared, leaving only a lingering sense of dread in the air. Ilara stood motionless for a moment, her eyes scanning the darkness, but the man was gone. Slowly, she turned back to Rapunzel, her expression grim. "You were right to be afraid," Ilara said softly. "He is not someone to be taken lightly." Rapunzel's breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to steady herself. "Who was he? And what does he want with me?" Ilara's eyes hardened. "That man is a servant of an ancient force. He seeks to control the magic that resides within you, magic that is far more powerful than you realize. And if you don't learn to control it soon, he won't be the last of your problems." Rapunzel's mind raced. She had no idea what this dark figure meant for her future, but one thing was clear. Her journey was about to become far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Chapter 9. The Battle. Within, the night after the mysterious figure vanished into the shadows, Rapunzel couldn't sleep. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, each one more disturbing than the last. Who was that man? What did he want from her? And why did she feel such an undeniable connection to him, as if he were tied to her past in a way she couldn't understand? Ilara had insisted they keep moving, not stopping for rest. They needed to stay alert, to avoid drawing any more attention. The threat was real, and it was closing in. But Rapunzel couldn't help but feel the weight of everything pressing down on her. Her magic, her power, had always been something she feared, something she didn't fully understand. Now, it felt like the very thing that would either save her or doom her. The next morning, the air was thick with tension. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows through the forest. Ilara had been unusually quiet since the encounter, her eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, as though expecting the stranger to reappear at any moment. Rapunzel, too, felt a presence in the air, an oppressive feeling that made her skin prickle. She couldn't shake the image of the man's eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had locked onto her with a sense of knowing, as if he'd been waiting for her to emerge from her cage. "What if I'm not ready?" Rapunzel asked softly, breaking the silence. She had kept the question in her mind all night, but now it slipped out without her thinking. Ilara paused, her steps slowing for a moment. "Ready for what?" "To face whatever is coming," Rapunzel replied, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "What if I can't control my magic? What if it consumes me instead of helping me?" Ilara's gaze softened, but only for a moment. Magic is not a tool, Rapunzel, she said. It is a force, like the earth, like the wind. You cannot control the wind, but you can learn to work with it. Your magic is the same. The more you fight it, the more it will resist. But when you accept it, when you learn to flow with it, you will find your true strength. Rapunzel nodded, but her heart was heavy. Alara's words made sense, but the fear was still there. The fear of losing control, of letting the magic overwhelm her. After all, she had never known anything but isolation, anything but the tower. How could she suddenly learn to wield such immense power? Alara gave her a sharp glance. There is something you must understand, Rapunzel. The world you left behind is not the same as the one you are entering. There are forces, dark forces, that will stop at nothing to claim your power. They will use every trick, every illusion to make you doubt yourself. But if you stay true to who you are, if you trust yourself, you can defeat them. Rapunzel nodded, though doubt still lingered in the pit of her stomach. As the day wore on, they reached the outskirts of a dense thicket. The trees were thick with vines, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. Alara motioned for Rapunzel to stop. "This is the place," Alara said, her voice quiet, yet filled with authority. "We must prepare ourselves." "Prepare for what?" Rapunzel asked, her heart pounding again. Alara turned to her, her face serious. "You're about to face something far more dangerous than that man from last night. Your greatest enemy is not him, it is yourself." Rapunzel blinked, confused. "Myself?" Alara nodded gravely. "The darkness that follows you is not just from the outside world. It is a reflection of the doubts, fears, and insecurities within you. And if you do not confront them now, they will destroy you." Rapunzel's breath caught in her throat. "You mean I have to fight my own fears?" "Exactly," Alara said, her eyes piercing. "And you will need your magic to do it. You will need to face what lies within you, even if it terrifies you." The ground beneath Rapunzel's feet seemed to tremble at Alara's words, and the air grew colder. She felt a surge of magic ripple through her hair, a force she couldn't control. Her heart raced in her chest as a strange, unsettling energy began to rise from deep within her. The forest around them seemed to warp, the trees stretching and twisting, their branches becoming like dark hands reaching for her. The world itself seemed to shift, to close in around her. "Close your eyes," Alara instructed, her voice a calm anchor in the swirling chaos. "Focus. Don't fight the darkness. Let it come, and confront it head on." Rapunzel squeezed her eyes shut, her breath shallow, her pulse racing. She could feel the darkness creeping in, could feel the cold, the weight of it pressing against her mind, the fear, the doubt. It was all there. Every insecurity, every failure, every moment of weakness she had ever felt was suddenly magnified, flooding her thoughts. She was a prisoner of her own mind, trapped by the very magic that had once been her greatest hope. But then she felt something else, something warm, something powerful. It was her magic, her own light, flickering through the darkness like a spark in a storm. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The light began to grow, and with it the darkness began to recede. "Let it burn," Alara's voice whispered. "Let your light consume your fears. Don't let them control you." Rapunzel's heart beat faster as she reached deep inside herself, letting the warmth of her magic spread through her body. The power surged, filling her veins, her chest, her hair. Her hair glowed with a brilliant light, and the darkness around her began to melt away, as if it were nothing more than smoke. But even as she felt the magic grow stronger, something else tugged at her, a voice, faint and distant, whispering doubts in her ear. "You're not strong enough," it said. "You'll never be able to control it. You're just a girl. You're nothing." The voice was hers, but it wasn't. It was the fear inside her, the self-doubt she had carried all her life. But this time, she refused to listen. She drew on her magic with everything she had, refusing to let the darkness claim her. And then, with a final powerful surge, the darkness shattered. The shadows evaporated into the air, leaving only the faintest trace of their presence behind. Rapunzel opened her eyes, breathing heavily, her body trembling from the exertion. Elara stood in front of her, her eyes filled with quiet pride. "You did it," Elara said softly. "You faced your fears, and you won." Rapunzel looked down at her glowing hair, still shimmering with the remnants of magic. It was more than just light. It was power, a power she had learned to control. For the first time, she felt like she was in control of herself, her magic, and her destiny. But she knew this was just the beginning. There was still so much to face, so much more to learn, and the road ahead was only going to get more dangerous. Chapter 10. The Path Forward. The morning after Rapunzel had confronted her inner darkness, the forest felt different. The air was clearer, the sunlight filtering through the trees with an almost ethereal glow. It was as if the world itself had been renewed, refreshed by her victory over the fears that had held her captive for so long. Rapunzel stood at the edge of a small clearing, her hair still glowing faintly from the magic she had wielded the night before. Elara was beside her, watching the horizon, her expression as unreadable as always. "You've done well," Elara said, breaking the silence. "But remember, this is only one battle. The journey ahead will test you in ways you cannot imagine." Rapunzel nodded, her heart still racing with the adrenaline of her success. She had faced her fears and won. But she knew there was more to come, more enemies, more challenges. The stranger she had encountered, the one who had been waiting for her, was still out there. And Elara had warned her that there were others who would seek to claim her power. "We need to keep moving," Elara continued, turning to face her. "The longer we stay in one place, the more likely it is that they'll find us." Rapunzel felt a shiver run down her spine. The thought of being hunted, of being pursued by dark forces, was terrifying. But she also knew she couldn't run forever. She had to face whatever came her way. "Where do we go now?" Rapunzel asked, her voice steady, despite the anxiety gnawing at her insides. Elara's eyes hardened. "There's a place, a sanctuary, far from here. It's hidden, protected by ancient magic. It's the only place where you can truly learn to control your power, to master it before they come for you." Rapunzel hesitated. The idea of leaving the only world she had known for so long, of stepping into the unknown once more, was daunting. But the urgency in Elara's voice left no room for doubt. She had to go. She had to prepare herself. "How do we get there?" Rapunzel asked. "It's not an easy path," Elara replied. "There are many obstacles, both physical and magical. The journey will be long and dangerous. But I believe you are ready. You've already proven you have the strength to face what lies ahead." Rapunzel took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying. She wasn't the same girl who had been trapped in a tower, fearful of the world beyond. She had learned to wield her magic, to face her darkest fears. Now it was time to confront the forces that sought to destroy her and the power that lay within her. "I'm ready," Rapunzel said, her voice firm. "Let's go." The two of them began their journey, traveling deeper into the forest. The path ahead was unclear, shrouded in mist and mystery, but Rapunzel felt a sense of calm she hadn't known before. She was no longer alone in her struggles. Elara was with her, guiding her every step of the way. As they walked, the silence between them grew more comfortable, the weight of their shared purpose settling into a steady rhythm. But even as the forest seemed to open up before them, a distant rumble echoed through the air, a warning, perhaps, that the darkness was never far behind. And then a voice broke the silence. "It's not over, Rapunzel." The voice was low, smooth, and unmistakably familiar. Rapunzel froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned slowly, her eyes searching the trees, but saw nothing. "Who's there?" she called, her magic already stirring within her hair, ready to react. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was him, the man from the night before. His face was still hidden beneath the hood of his cloak, but the presence of his power was undeniable. He had come for her, just as Elara had warned. "You think you can escape me," the man said, his voice cold and mocking. "You cannot run from what you are, Rapunzel. You are mine." Rapunzel felt the weight of his words, but she did not falter. "I am no one's," she said, her voice strong, steady. "You won't control me." The man laughed, a sound that sent a chill through her bones. "We shall see," he said. "The magic inside you will always seek its true master, and when the time comes, you will choose. Your power cannot remain free forever." With a flick of his wrist, the ground beneath Rapunzel's feet began to crack, as if the earth itself were responding to his command. Elara moved in front of Rapunzel, her hand on the hilt of her knife, ready to protect her. But Rapunzel stepped forward, her hair glowing with bright, fiery light. "I won't let you take me," she said, her voice unwavering. "You can't control me anymore." For the first time, she felt fully connected to the magic that flowed through her. It wasn't something to fear. It was a part of her, and she would use it to protect herself, to protect the world she had chosen to live in. The man's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise passing over his face. But it was only for a moment before he regained his composure. "You will regret this," he hissed, his eyes narrowing. "I will return, and next time you will not be so fortunate." With a final gesture, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Rapunzel standing in the clearing, her heart racing, but her resolve stronger than ever. Elara turned to Rapunzel, her eyes filled with approval. "You did well," she said quietly. "You are not the same girl who was locked away in that tower. You are becoming something far greater." Rapunzel nodded, her eyes focused on the path ahead. She had faced the darkness within herself, and she had emerged stronger. But she knew the true battle was just beginning. The man was only the beginning, and there were others who would come for her magic. She could feel it in her bones. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: she was ready for whatever came next. And with that, Rapunzel and Elara continued their journey, stepping into the unknown, bound by the knowledge that the fight for her freedom and for the magic she now controlled had only just begun.